Okay, July 31st. Wow. Half of the year is gone already. Amazing. It's too much fun when you're going fast, fast, fast. So the weather is still, nice, I would say. It's only 92 in Austin. It's not bad. Could be worse. We have a great guest today. Lots of stuff going on with election fraud in other countries and our own political challenges and the economy and the stock market. Today, the Fed is announcing if they're touching the rates or not. That would be interesting to see what comes out of that. Um, but before we get going with things, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
Well, you know, Andreas, we had a request for this song by a listener by the name of Renard Burton Parker, who listens all the time.
Okay.
And this is a request for Mrs. Burton Parker. So I had to go back and make sure I could learn it. Amarillo by morning, up from San Antonio. The only thing that I got is what I've got on. Well, I ain't got a dime, but what I got is fine. Ain't rich, but Lord, I'm free. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo is where I'll be. I lost my fella in Houston, broke my leg in Santa Fe. I lost a wife and a girlfriend somewhere along the way. When they open that gate, I'll be looking for aid. Lord, I hope that judge ain't blind. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo is on my mind.
All right.
That is for Miss Renee Burton. I hope she's listening because I had to go back and make sure that I could play it.
Yeah. Well, Johnny, today I was in your old neck of the woods at Pickle at UT. I was visiting the Texas Institute for Electronics and learning about the CHIP Act and what they're doing there, and a pretty impressive $1 billion plus investment, and lots of companies involved in bringing the future to America, bringing manufacturing, chip manufacturing, and all kinds of things. Very, very interesting. And obviously all the things that we kind of pay attention to. So I'm wondering what's keeping John Butler busy this week.
Well, you know, it's the same thing that's keeping you busy. And I had a company that came in from Korea that dropped a cool 30 million on the University of Texas for research in the minerals area, and I helped get that done. And with a company called Zoetic, you know that company because we have
Yep.
with them. And of course, last night we had a an assassination in the Middle East with Hamas, and the question is, what would that do not only for America but the escalation of things in that part of the world? We
Mm-hmm.
all hope that interest rates will come down. I think if we look at what we do, Andreas, then for us in business enterprises, the lower the interest rate, the better. But for the individual family who has CDs, the higher the interest rates, the better it is. So all of this dovetails into, as you said, creating the future of a business enterprise. And another thing I did was I invited, in terms of the future, and I invited John Mackey to be a keynote speaker at Digital 360, and we hope that he accepts so he can tell us the lessons of his book on conscious capitalism. His other book is the Whole Story, and he was the founder of Whole Foods. So we hope that John Mackey will accept. But what really, really bothers me now is the uncertainty over the future, based on the interest rates, what's going on in the political arena with the presidential campaign. And so it bothers me because of the impact it might have on a business enterprise. We all understand the importance of, quote, global warming. And I think this old Earth has always done what it wanted to do. But I don't know if we can spend, $100 trillion trying to save the Earth just by through American taxpayers' money. I also don't think that windmills by themselves and the other stuff that we talked about last time could create the electricity that will create the future. So it all boils down to leadership, and we need leadership that looks at the economy. We do not leaders who are throwing insults at each other. We need to talk about the policies. We need to talk about the interest rate. We need to talk about what's going on with NATO. We need to talk about what's going on in the Middle East. We need to talk about all these policy orientating things rather than saying, I'm good and I'm great, or rather than saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And so we got two presidential candidates, and the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, I'm a Kappa Alpha Psi, and she was a Kappa kitten in college. So I think that's pretty interesting to see a Kappa kitten run for president of the United States. I think with the Trump administration, it's interesting to see what's going on there and how they're responding to that challenge. So, Andreas, for the most part, as you know, what we do is we keep our nose to what's important for the future, and that is new technologies, business, enterprise, the creation of jobs, and finally, I'll say this: people have asked me about China when China continue to rise. I said China has already risen. Okay, so we need to change that to China has already risen. The electric cars are absolutely fantastic. You can get one for $5,000, whereas in America, they were subsidized and they're very, very high. The emphasis on science and technology is right where it needs to be. But on the other hand, I think America is still leading in the technologies that really, really make economies go. Okay, that is, if you look at the internet with Microsoft and how business is done, even Facebook and those kind of things, we're still there. So I'm just trying to be like Andre Cavallo when I grow up, following your lead.
Llewellyn Kane, what keeps you up at night these days?
About Johnny.
Llewellyn, I never did drink until I met Llewellyn. He drives me to drink.
I've done something very exciting. I had an interview for my television program with two researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, who are doing extraordinary things with AI and medicine, particularly finding precursors, especially to Alzheimer's. And at a time when we get a lot of anxiety about artificial intelligence, will it take away jobs? Will the Chinese beat us at it? I don't know if you read the longish piece that Sam Altman wrote, excuse me, I beg your pardon, this week in the Washington Post. That was kind of depressing, that if we don't do this and do that, somebody else will get ahead of us, and the dictatorships will dominate the world. Anyway, talking to people who are actually using AI constructively and really doing extraordinary things, because you're going to be able to either identify, you may be able to identify the faulty gene and correct the gene, therefore producing a solution to that and many other medicines. So AI is forging ahead very constructively. That followed on two extraordinary conferences, both influenced by NASA on artificial intelligence and its application in society. And in that way, I'm suddenly very excited about it. I'm still concerned about what it will do for jobs, how it will be applied, to what extent it will really impact adversely the underclass, people of little skill, doing menial work, to what extent they will be put out of work by artificial intelligence, but I tell you, talking to these very, very smart women, and in many ways, artificial intelligence has gotten a huge number of women at the very top. I saw that at two conferences I went to, one in Spain, one at the NASA headquarters in Greenbelt, Maryland. And that's very exciting. And suddenly there's no talk of glass ceilings or the frustrations of women in business. These women are leading and they're very excited about it, correctly so. And we should be as well. As a little note that I would throw in, that when I look around the people I now know in the artificial intelligence community, and I'm getting to know quite a lot, a preponderance of them, or at least half of them, are women, which is very exciting. But the other thing is a lot of them were not born in the United States. And that's something that people who are planning to deport a lot of immigrants might want to think seriously about. Much of the advantage we have in high tech is from people who are either not born in this country or whose ancestry is not traditionally the ancestry of Americans. And you and I can speak to that, can't we, Andre, as being immigrants ourselves?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I concur. So it's really interesting that, you know, of all the things that we track on digital transformations, from energy and water to other things, smart cities is really sort of the big umbrella of all this sort of renaissance of how the future will look like. And we talked about flying vehicles and autonomous vehicles and street lights and everything connected and intelligent, and maybe new materials and new ways of harnessing power in the sun and all this. So we have a great guest today, Madison Playford, who is the program manager for policy planning and funding team at Arcadis. And Arcadis is a global leader in delivering intelligence-driven sustainable design and engineering solutions for natural and built assets. So I'm dying to share some insights with Madison. I've known her from her prior life, and maybe Madison, well, you can open up, and we're delighted to have you with your background, and then jump into Arcadis and what Arcadis is doing and what do you guys do, and we go from there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me as well. I'm happy to be here and exciting to chat with you. I initially met Andres through my last position at NRTC. We were doing rural broadband solutions and really bridging that digital divide where we see in urban communities there's great access to internet and technology, but in rural areas, which are more prominent in the United States, we don't have access to internet services always. And so my last company was doing that, and I wanted to focus more on sustainable solutions, which led me to Arcadis. I focus primarily on water solutions in my current role. A lot of flood risk analysis, funding strategies for water, and that's kind of what led me to be on this show today.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can share a lot of detail what you guys do
Yeah.
Arcadis, Madison, with your clients and all that, but can you describe a bit the scope of the company and some of the
Yeah.
projects you guys work on in different technologies, different sectors?
Totally. So Arcadis is a global organization. It is almost 40,000 people. So to know every single business pocket, I'm still learning. But my team primarily is planning, policy, and funding. And we're really focused in water, not saying that we don't do energy, because we absolutely do and have a really great team for that. Primarily, we work with local, state, and federal agencies, government agencies, to design and plan their projects in alignment with funding so that sustainable strategies are now implemented and it becomes a reality using BCA methodology. Our team assists with the grant application process, project management, grant management, and then dashboarding and reporting capabilities once they do receive that funding. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Johnny, you're muted.
Madison, I have a
Yeah.
intense interest in business models around technologies.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in technologies being a Christmas tree that I look at and say, wow, look at that Christmas tree sparkle. I want to know your ideas, and we've worked on this at 512 CMG. As you do all of these great technologies in the rural areas and install the technologies and measure the technologies, what are your business models? Let's call it business development in your case, not for you, not for your company, but for the businesses of America, for the businesses of the small town. Why? So if we're going to put broadband in all small towns in Texas, and then we got this great Christmas tree, the question is, I live in a small town. I have a business. How's that going to help me? What's the business model as I try to go into business in this great internet of things? What's my business model? How do I make a living?
For adding the broadband to your service?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking to a community, I'm not interested in just a Christmas light. I'm not interested in things,
Yeah.
I want to know from a business point of view, what will it do for my bicycle shop? What will it do for my restaurant? What would it be for my my computer shop? For my market? What will it do? So how do
Absolutely.
you encourage me, with your activity and a planner to come to my small town as a business?
Yeah, particularly we don't work necessarily with business for grant funding, which is typically for governments, but how we would look into that would be a holistic view. For residents, it would be, you would really look at healthcare, schooling access to new jobs, the technology for businesses to be able to sell online is huge in this digital market of today. Brick and mortar is not outdated. I think it's kind of making a little bit of a comeback, but it's definitely been on the decline. So being able to reach people digitally, marketing, sales, I think are huge plays that we would add into that business model.
Okay, so in other words, wouldn't it be great if your company would have a company like 512 CMG to go to the local communities and say, look, when you do this as a strategy, right, this is how it will enhance the people who live there to make a living or to enhance their business enterprises. So would you ever think about adding, and this is just a John Butler being John Butler, or keeping my good friend well and up night, wondering how could he have those business models, right? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, how do you just lay the technology without thinking about the business enterprises?
Oh, absolutely. And we do have a community for when we help communities start with the funding strategies. Something that's becoming more and more popular is a community engagement portion of that. So when businesses or governments, agencies are introducing new technology or introducing new projects, they really want to make sure that the community is aware of what's going on. They know what jobs are going to become available, as a lot of the funding through grants are become more competitive when you add local jobs. So we definitely make sure that community engagement is at the forefront by putting funding and making sure that they have meetings and input by locals.
Okay, thank you very much.
What do you do for your clients? I'm having a little difficulty understanding what happens when your clients are and what you do. There's certain sort of large factors we know about water. It's essential. In many places, it's in short supply.
Mhm.
We're overtaxing resources. I don't know what happened if it rained overnight, but just yesterday, Washington, D.C. was facing water shortages and asking people to take shorter showers. It's always been vulnerable because it depends on a single river, the Potomac, and when that runs low, there are no large impoundments on it. They're all small impoundments, and there's really no place to build a vast impoundment. And this is true across the country. Everything's all right when it's all right. California periodically has severe drought conditions, and the Colorado River, which so much of the West depends on, is a variable feast. What are your long-term solutions? Are you looking to things like ameliorating demand by using more gray water? Are you looking for new supplies, better impoundment? Are you looking to save the aquifers or to have more groundwater brought to the surface? A lot of questions arise.
Yeah, absolutely. So, different parts of Arcadis are looking into all of those parts. The ones that I've specifically worked on to address water shortages would be AMI. So, with that, we'll work with clients to install meters at each resident point so that they can track their usage and make sure that there is a water supply that is long-term available. And then my team now would actually help get funding for that project. One of the really great funds that we found to support AMI, as it is a costly venture and that does come back into taxes, and we need to make sure that it's a good business model. There is a WaterSmart water efficiency and energy grant that can be applied. So that has a 50-50 cost share, and we'll help our clients design the project, go through the application process for the grant, and then once it's decided if the project was accepted and funding is available, we can also help with grant management through that.
Not sure everybody in the audience knows what AMI is.
Okay, advanced meter infrastructure. So it's like a tiny meter that would go into the water system, and so each house would report their water usage via a satellite or via typically it's uploaded every day into a portal, so you could see real time when you have a leak, and you wouldn't be guessing anymore of why your rate is so high, and you wouldn't get your water bill necessarily at the end of the month. You still would get it at the end, but you would be able to see that usage in real time, alleviating leaks and making sure that there is a water supply. The city would be able to catch leaks as well.
There are a number of problems that water faces, some of which are the supply of the resource and some of which are delivery of the resource. Infrastructure. London, for example, is having problems with water, but that's because the water company is in trouble, not because there's a shortage of water. Do you address problems like that? Do you seek to integrate the systems and say we've got to deal with these factors, we've got to deal with the resource, its delivery, its metering, and its pricing, are all those in play when you sit down with a client? Presumably a client is a state, county, or a city or something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So we go through all of that, where their sourcing is from. And then typically what we really focus on is that customer portal, making sure that the clients have a great digital experience, and that it's an easy to use platform, that the data is being uploaded from the AMI systems, and that there is a pricing model in place to cover the technology.
You mentioned the rural impact at the beginning of the broadcast, but of course, in most rural areas that I'm familiar with, water is from boreholes, from wells, not from a central system, so metering is not part of that equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is something that would be in rural. I used to work in rural more than I do right now. Typically, I work in more urban settings, although there are parts of Arcadis that do rural areas as well. But typically, I work with a large municipal system at this point.
So you work where there is an infrastructure of delivered water by a
Delivered water, yes.
municipality or some local authority.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a quick question on you know, the technology behind the AMI. So a lot of these communication networks are what is called RF mesh. They're wireless. They're using unlicensed spectrum, 900 megahertz, and companies that provide those solutions are companies like Itron or Aclara, Census. There are others that use cellular technology, like Badger and Neptune and others. And so the water consumption is collected at the meter all the time, nonstop, but it's upgraded or uploaded to the cloud on a scheduled basis. So many companies upload the information on an hourly basis or every 2 hours or 3 hours. But the data is real time collected. So the decision of what's happening on the round trip is probably delayed by about an hour on average. Some systems on the cellular side are moving more up to the 5 minutes, couple of minutes timeline. So anyway, there's a question that I'm answering on the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely.
Helping
And
people understand that.
Yeah, yep. And the client is able to choose how often they want to upload it. So some clients I've worked with want to do it every 15 minutes. That's just such a large amount of data to work with, sometimes to really filter through. So sometimes there's different recommendations for different client preferences.
Yep. Yep.
Well, let me just follow up on that real fast. So the data themselves, when you upload the data, you have so much data. How does it interact with the smart city? How does it interact with the ability of the smart city to be more efficient? How do you measure that? What's the measure of that?
Absolutely. So there are different portals which are available to clients. We also help them with the portal selection process to make sure that it's meeting all their goals. And then you can set certain filters to raise alarms. So when water has been flowing at a certain rate for so long without any break, that would flag a leak. And then there would be, you know, maybe an automated call or an automated text message that would go out to that client and say, "Hey, is everything okay? Are you filling a swimming pool? Is something going on here, or is it just, you know, is there a leak?" And then they could send someone out right away. Without an AMI system, that data isn't available until maybe the end of the month or the next month when they get their bill and they're like, "Oh my goodness, what is this really, really high bill, and how did this happen?" And then they would send somebody out. And then, you know, at that point, there's wasted resources, and a really expensive bill, and probably a not very happy customer. So that is where that comes in to solve
How
the
do you see this interacting with the rest of the data in terms of the data produced on electricity and use that's behind the meter and in front of the meter? So water, as Llewellyn just said, is very important. Is changing. We don't have pipes running from Louisiana to Arizona to bring more water. So the measurement of where it is going becomes very, very important. My question is, when it interacts with electricity, do you see a relationship? It doesn't have to be causal, if you will. Do you see a relationship between the different metrics that you have for water, electricity, what's going on in the smart city, how they interact with each other? Do you have a total metric for that, which equals improvement or needs improvement?
I think that there like the goals set by specific cities in their areas. A lot of the time I was working in cities in Arizona, which are, you know, prone to droughts. They have higher goals and more specific targets that they want to meet, rather than something in Michigan per se, where they're filled with water. So that is really a client specific question on the target of goals. And then with AMI, there is electric AMI as well as gas metering as well. So how that all works together really is it's a location by location basis. You know, in Arizona, you're going to need to use a lot more air conditioning. You're going to need some more power for that rather than in cooler areas as well. So I guess there isn't a cut and dry answer for how they interact and what levels we should see it working at.
Interesting, because I had a notice from the city of Austin that I had a slow leak somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we called them on the telephone.
Uh-huh.
And they said, we don't know where it is, but I guess you can go out and measure, you can measure the, I don't know, what's going on in the meter, turn it off, and then come back and measure it again. But they're going to send somebody out. And they think it is a sprinkler system rather than anything in the house. So yeah, that's very, very interesting. But
that is interesting.
Yeah,
Did you get that as like a text message or a call, or was that something that was like at the end of the month that you got?
No.
Like, do you know if you have an AMI system?
It was real time.
Oh, amazing.
In Austin, Texas. Yeah, it was real time. And I said, well, so I walked around the house. I didn't see anything. I thought maybe Llewellyn was out there, cutting pipe to make my life miserable. But I didn't find him out there. I didn't see any bow ties out there. And so we talked to the people, and they're going to come out, and from there, the guy did the experiment, if you will, and said, okay, we're going to send somebody out because we think it's to hook up to the water system.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder if they knew that some places will have a separate meter for irrigation rather than your home, because it just depending on how it all breaks off and how the city was set up. Right. But sometimes it can identify a little quicker with that as well.
Well, if it goes bad in Texas, I know that Llewellyn King has a bedroom for me and a steak every night for me, as we say in Louisiana, up north.
I have a bedroom for you, and the locks are on the outside.
You notice, Madison, let me say this. When he talked about immigrants, you notice he didn't include me in that. He said me and Andreas. You notice he did not include me.
So you're part of the residual problem. I want to ask you about leaks. We see the use of artificial intelligence and just much smarter sensors. Doesn't have to be linked up to any sort of artificial intelligence, but sensors are everywhere and getting better. We have more data. What is the state of the art of detecting leaks? It's not easy for a homeowner with quite an extensive underground piping system to go out and dig it up and find a leak. Sophisticated ways of finding leaks, because that's a huge waste of water leakage.
Right. So there are different technologies out there for residential owners, but at the same time, I am not as educated as I should be on what they should be adding on to their home to make sure. I have met someone who did work in making sure that toilet leaks were being well tracked, because that's where most residential leaks do come from. And they have that technology, although I don't know the pricing and what the cost benefit would actually be from that. But
good stuff. You are, because when we do smart cities here, right, it's all about measuring things. It's about measuring things for the efficiency of the city. And if you look at what's happening in medicine, they're doing the same thing with the human body. I looked at a company, some science the other day, Llewellyn, where they could put the sensors in your cells, literally, and look at your cells as disease develop. So you're at the very, very center. You're going to have a lot of data. And one of the great things that people always ask is this: if I am studying this whole process of smart cities to improve cities, which data are available to a person like me who, say, is a principal in 512 CMG Consulting, to bring data to the table and say, this is where we are locally, this is where we are internationally. So would you allow me to look into your data set and create my own data set so I can run the the equations for me and understand smart cities better, or do you just take all the data and gobble it up yourself?
Well, because you would have to get that from a city, in particular, because it is confidential data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I do think that's the next step. As we
Yeah.
talk about smart cities, we need to measure
Measure
what we,
it. Yeah.
you know, what
Yeah, it would
it,
have to be publicly available data that
right.
could be shared, unless a city is willing to work with CMG. Yeah.
So Madison, I'm curious, there are, to my knowledge, some 52,000 water systems in the US, providing water to the, 25,000 plus cities and communities incorporated, that enjoy the education of some 14,000 independent school districts. So the water system is massive, and every water system is independent and autonomous. The pipes are not interconnected, right? So kind of different from the grid. The power grid is all interconnected. The water systems are not, for obvious reasons. You maintain water levels with pressure and so on. So trying to get a sense from you of dollar size. So when you're doing these projects, what is the biggest project you guys are working on or have worked on? I mean, we're talking $1 million, $10 million, hundreds of millions. And what is the smallest one? Give us a sense of that.
Yeah, so there's phased projects. So starting a pilot would be in the low couple million, and then other of the AMI projects could span tens of millions to over 100 million. Yeah, depending on the size of the city. But you typically start with a pilot to make sure everything's running well. And but the startup is really the most expensive because you need to get the wireless system set up and you need to get the portal set up so that it's a full running system. And then from there, it becomes a little bit more economic for the rest of the city. Yeah.
Who are the beneficiaries? Is the homeowner by a significant savings? Is the local authority because it's a management system better? Who's the winner when you put in advanced systems?
I would say that the major benefits would be residents and making the client experience, the cost, and ensuring that resources are used resourcefully and respectfully to the environment. I would also think that the biodiversity is also being preserved of different animals and species because the water supply is not always shrinking as much and it's being able to be measured from the original water source, from the Colorado River and other areas.
Wow. I mean, this is so when you have your strategy sessions as we do with business enterprise, and you look 40, 50 years down the road, right? Look at where we are, what the data are telling us now. What do you see, Madison? I mean, what do you see for
Very
your
exciting.
children and grandchildren? I mean, what do you see in Arizona?
Yeah.
Is it different than New York? Would everybody have to move back to New York, near water to secure water in America? Just what do you see? What's your recommendations?
Yeah, I would say understanding. I'm very optimistic. I very much see that water, although there are drought difficulties now, there are water quality issues. I do see that there's huge overcoming possibilities of being sure that desalination of water. I could see that becoming more economic in the future. I also see a huge movement of preservation and conservation, and the policies behind it are become available, especially in the United States. I just spent some time in London studying their funding structure and their policies to see what the difference is. And honestly, in London, I saw so many policies and recognition that climate change is real, it's happening, it's here, and here's what we're doing about it. And I really don't think that the states are that far behind it. I think that the policies are really coming, and that the things like the Water Smart grants. We have other a long list of grants that are here and can be used as well, to make sure that there's water efficiency in the future and that it's preserved for generations.
Well, Madison, one of the things when you study geography in America and ecology, there's a lot of civilizations disappeared in your world in Arizona. The question is what happened to the Aztecs. The more we dig in Arizona, the more civilizations that we find. If you look at the great civilizations of South America, and anthropologists ask, what happened to the people? Probably left and moved to other parts of the continent. So do you think, and this is just an interesting philosophical question, that water shortage would mean a movement away from the Southwest in America, back to the Cleveland, Ohio, and where water is everywhere, Great Lakes? Are we going to have that in the future, or should we have that?
I think there's a limit, I think there's a limit on the growing population in Arizona and the Southwest and other areas that you mentioned. I don't think everybody can move there and make it sustainable and make sure that we preserve the natural landscape of, the Great Lakes, and where there is clean and fresh water, even though that comes with the snow and the cold. Unfortunately, but I do think that it's possible for civilizations to continue in the Southwest as long as they understand the risks and they are, actively making moves to combat climate change and the other issues that they're coming.
Yeah. One of the things that's got my head scratching is itching is that you said you went to London.
Yes.
To see what their policies were. They think that climate change is 100% real. Everybody knows that the climate has always changed. I always tell people, yeah, change. Go ask the dinosaurs. Go dig up the dinosaurs and see what happened. And then you said that the policies of London, could they be applied to the policies of America, given the fact that they are in lots of water around lots of water? I mean, do you think we can learn something from London, which we cut loose in 1776? I mean, you could have come to Austin, Texas, and been a trip. I know myself. What did you learn in London?
Are you baiting Llewellyn?
Yes, I'm baiting. I'm baiting Llewellyn. I'm baiting Llewellyn because he loves the king and the queen. I just want to know what did she learn?
Obviously there's still challenges there. There's challenges everywhere. I just saw that everybody was really working together, and the policies were more in place. One of the things that I was told is that there's a charge just to be able to drive into the city every day, to encourage public transportation. The EA works directly on projects to prepare for like the rising sea level, such as Team 2100, which I was fortunate enough to work with.
If you could suspend your filibuster, Johnny, I would like to ask about how much our way of life, how we've exported it from the east, which is on the whole water plentiful, to the west, which is water deprived. But the first thing people do, and I've seen this when they move to Arizona, is they put in a garden like the one they had. They want a lawn like the one they had. They want a golf course to play on so that when Johnny visits, he can be kept out of mischief. These are cultural American prerogatives, particularly the green lawn, etc., and of course the passion to garden. But we tend to have taken the gardening that we have in water plentiful parts of the world and try to introduce it into water. When I grew up in Africa, we had things like rock gardens where, because water was short, you didn't waste it on a garden. You did something equally artistic, but different. recognizing that water was precious. We have yet to come, I think, to recognize the water's precious here. And if we're going to talk about London, the problem with London is not water. The problem is the political infrastructure of the water companies, which are now under great attack from the Labour government.
I think
What do you say about what do you think that you should? I'm sorry, I should have phrased that more as a question, Madison. But what do you think about the way we use water, the cultural ways we use water, not the essential ways, but the cultural ways? Washing the car all the time, for example.
Yeah, that needs to be geographic. One thing that I've always kind of went upon is, so personally, I don't enjoy meat and I don't eat it. And I think people should be able to eat whatever they want as long as it's available in their natural landscape, or they know how much it costs to get that over, and understand what it would take for everybody to live that way. It's just not sustainable. Making sure that people understand, like the green grass, like you're saying, or the swimming pools. In Arizona, everybody wants a swimming pool, which it sounds awesome to have that, but it's very challenging when there's just not the water availability. I think educating citizens and the public on how much resources, like how many resources are available and how they need to be planned and allocated, and so that everybody can be a part of the change. Everybody can understand that. And I think you talked on Africa a little bit. One strategy that really has intrigued me is the day zero, when they had started the campaign for day zero when they were going to run out of water. And so I always thought that was such a cool way that they were able to overcome. Obviously they had some great rain and other things happened, but to watch everybody conserve it in a way that framed it for their position, I thought was really, really awesome.
This is very interesting, Madison. When you're going to tell me I got to pay a fee to drive my car into Austin, Texas, then we're really talking about a second revolution here. When you tell me that we have policies that would take away basic freedoms, then it becomes very, very interesting and dynamic. So this is why I think your work is so important. I mean, as you do comparative analysis with what happens in London, comparative analysis with what happens in Africa, or what's happening, of course, in other parts of the world, Australia especially. Then policy interacts with the whole issue of freedom of movement, freedom of what you can actually do. And I think when that happens, you have a very, very interesting kind of future.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. And I think going back to what he had just touched on was the cultural basis. In the United States, everybody very much values their freedom, and sometimes it's not sustainable freedom. And so just that's where it does come into the education part of community engagement and really getting everybody involved to understand the impacts of their decisions, and not trying to, take away freedom, but just make, understand what we're doing and how to make things a better place. And no policy is, a fix all. The day zero may have worked better for certain reasons in Africa than it would in the United States. So I think that's a great thing to keep in mind as well.
I think that, you guys are talking about all this, and I keep thinking and coming back to, we are in the 21st century, sort of a transitional century, as we move from scarcity thinking to abundant thinking. And how we, with technology, are learning how to make that reality. So for example, I remind everybody that the Earth is graced with 17,000 terawatt hours of solar energy every day. And if we were to harness it all, we wouldn't need any more energy for the rest of our lives if we could store it all. And similarly with water, there's a lot of innovation going on with desal, and we had our fellow from Sky H2O a few weeks ago on how they have a machine that harnesses the air humidity and turns that into drinking water. And so it's interesting how I go back to the fact that a lot of what we're living and seeing and going through is just a transition of a mindset of scarcity with no technology or very little technology, very little understanding of physics in the world, to a world of abundant enabled by technology and hopefully most likely driven by AI.
Well, it's just, I mean, technology will be there, but in the case of water, you've got two things going on. The absence of water, or let's say it's flight, the absence of the air to fly it in, and then the measurement of the absence. And the question is, how do you measure the present, right, to make sure that there is a future? So you're right. AI can be, much more interesting. For example, I read a lot of patents and stuff, instead of looking at patents now, the AI reads it to me. It's just absolutely, that one thing has saved, just hundreds of hours out of everything. But the question that we have here is not so much the technology, we're running out of the resource. And there's no water, there's nothing to measure.
Yeah, but I go back to how we design houses and neighborhoods and everything, and we don't do rain catching, right? And we don't do gray water reuse. If I wash my hands, why do I throw that water away? Why don't I use that water to water my lawn, right? So it really goes back to the sort of the inadequate design of how we have built homes and cities and aqueducts and piping, and it's not sustainable thinking. It's not reusable thinking. It's not to optimize the resource, right? And so and then obviously there's all these new technologies that are emerging that desal or whatever allow you to generate water from sources that you never thought you could. And then we have pipes everywhere. Why couldn't the natural gas or oil pipes in the US be used to push water around when it rains too much in one geography versus another geography, so on and so on.
I think so. And so let me ask you this question, Madison. So when we think about the actual scarcity, right? Which policy do you think, like Andrea said, I mean, we got the washing your hands. What policy would be good to ensure that water would be in policies you learned from England, London policies we learned from discussions with your colleagues? What would be the best policy you think for people to try to engage in for the future? And then all of a sudden we have a flood. So that's what.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say that's a geographic question as well, on basing how much water usage you can use as a residential area. But I really think that it's less residential and more industrial. I think that there needs to be industrial accountability rather than pushing it back to residential. So ensuring that the water that we use industrially is something that it makes a good change in the world.
I think that where Madison's business comes into play is putting economic value on water. It is a de minimis value often. It's a throwaway. Of all of the services delivered to the home, it's the cheapest and therefore the most abused probably. But society abuses water, and there are technologies which will not replenish or replace the resource, but which will certainly extend it. And you see them in farming. The Israelis have been front and center in better use of water with drip feed irrigation. They're able quite literally to make the desert bloom by the very efficient use of water. And that's very important. And we can see that, we will see it in the home when we have a meter that is very identifiable, that you, and this is where Madison's company is doing invaluable work, where you can see the money being spent as you waste the water. You know, and when people say turn the lights out, people are going to say, hey, you've been in the shower for 6 minutes, it's enough, get clean, get out. It's social change. An ethic, a water ethic has to be established. But it takes a long time. We do establish ethics. We established one about the environment in general. So of the environmental ethic, we need a sub-ethic on water so we stop wasting it. It also, the supply, even in places, I've been in London, when there has been a drought and when there's been fear about water supply. In Washington, I mentioned, generally it has plenty of water, except when it doesn't, which is periodically every few years. And so we need some sense of valuing this resource and in due time building an infrastructure that separates grey water from potable water.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Great statement.
So Madison, I'm looking at the time here and wondering how much are you traveling? What kind of conferences do you go to? What's in front of you over the next 6 months? What projects, if anything?
Yeah, we are just about to go into brick season, which is going to be, that's our busiest season of the year. So we're going to get ready to help clients all over the world plan their projects to be in alignment with with the brick grant, and then go through and do between 50 and 100, I would imagine, applications. And then after that, traveling wise, I don't have anything really on the books yet. Yeah, I think that's our next big push in this industry. I would say it's a shorter turnaround, 6 to 10 weeks is a typical application, and then getting our projects scheduled and ready to go is going to be my job.
Well, so I'm gonna circle back with you. We
Yeah.
have our annual conference coming up, the Youth 360 Summit, and we have
Absolutely.
two sessions on water, September 24th and September 25th. And maybe if you're available, you can join us in one of those panels.
That would be lovely. Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's the best idea if you had this year, Andreas.
Johnny, any final thoughts?
No, again, all of the new technologies is looking at measurement. And this is one where we looked at not only the measurement of things, but the resources. So Llewellyn have talked about, well, if we run out of the raw materials to do chips, what do? How do we keep going as a society? Do we have enough materials to create all the batteries on electric cars? Do we have enough materials to do all of these things? So I like the idea here, Madison, where we're combining, the actual measurement of things to the actual resources. I mean, can we make enough chips? Can we make enough computers?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, at one time we just depended upon rubber trees, and then Ford Motor Company came up with a way that we had synthetic rubber. So all of these things are important for the movement of modern society, the movement of a market economy. So it's been very, very good. But being a Southern Louisiana boy, the water and I, sometimes we don't mix.
Yeah, I think that the most interesting thing about all that is why we are transitioning from a world of scarcity to a world of abundance, and through our learning of technology. The fact that there's roughly 3 billion people on the planet that don't have access to fresh water is just mind-boggling to me. You know, it's and obviously, you know, Llewellyn and I probably grew up in a similar scenario where, you know, there was no warm water. If you wanted to take a warm bath, you had to actually boil the water and warm it up, and then, you know, dispense it outside in the outside shower or something like that. I mean, you know, we sit in these bubbles. We live in a bubble in many ways in the US and wherever you are in the US, that is a bubble. And it's kind of fascinating how, you know, we were talking about rural a little bit, and I go back to the notion of sustainability, and I find it fascinating that is the rural regions, geographies, communities, the agricultural communities, the ranching communities. They are probably the leading places where sustainability and the final answers are going to come from, because they really have learned and live in a sustainable way, unlike cities, which are very wasteful. Llewellyn?
I think that Madison, you're in a very exciting place because of all the great basic resources. Really, the last one we are bringing technology to bear on it in all the most primitive ways, and primitive is a powerful example. Bringing technology to bear on it, that makes for a very exciting undertaking and a very good place to be. And I salute you for being there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's exciting to
So-
share and be here.
Yeah, absolutely, Madison. Thank you for joining us, and it's always good to switch topics. We talk about electricity too much, and I'm gonna keep looking into Arcadis and all the things that you guys do. You have your hands in many things that are smart city related stuff, and as an engineering consulting firm. So thank you for being with us, and hopefully we'll connect again, and maybe you can join us at the Digital 360 Summit, September 24th, 25th.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Johnny,
Wonderful
take
to-
us away.
What has happened down here? The wind have changed. Clouds rolled in from the north and it started to rain. It rained real hard and it rained for a real long time. 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline, Louisiana, Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana, Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. Trying to wash us away. President Coolidge come down, big old plane. Little fat man had a notepad. President say, little fat man, you know it's just a shame. River has done these poor Louisiana's land.
Woo! Thank you, Johnny.
Okay,
Always a pleasure.
it's always a pleasure. Y'all take care. Okay.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.